The night sky over Gaza City turned a horrifying shade of orange. It was March 18, 2025, just before dawn. Families were breaking their Ramadan fast. Then the bombs began to fall. Israeli jets, swift and merciless, unleashed their deadly payload. The roar was deafening. Buildings crumbled, reduced to dust and rubble. Over 400 Palestinians, many of them women and children, perished in the sudden onslaught. Hundreds more lay wounded, their cries echoing through the smoke-filled streets. It was a scene of unimaginable carnage. The Israeli Defense Forces, or IDF, were quick to claim responsibility. Their target, they insisted, were Hamas commanders. Among the dead, they confirmed, was Mahmoud Abu Wafa, Gaza's deputy interior minister and a high-ranking security official. But the sheer scale of the bombardment, the indiscriminate nature of the attacks, told a different story. This was not surgical precision, this was collective punishment. From Beit Hanun in the north to Rafah in the south, no corner of Gaza was spared. The densely populated strip, already reeling from years of blockade and conflict, was once again transformed into a battleground. Hospitals, already stretched to breaking point, were inundated with casualties. Doctors and nurses, exhausted and traumatized, worked tirelessly to save lives, but the sheer number of wounded overwhelmed their capacity. Even before the bombs began to fall, Gaza was on the brink of a humanitarian catastrophe. For months, Israel had imposed a crippling blockade on the Strip. Essential supplies, food, fuel, medicine were allowed in only sporadically. The result was widespread suffering. Hospitals ran short of vital equipment. Power outages became the norm. And now, in the aftermath of the latest bombardment, the situation has gone from desperate to catastrophic. The international community condemned the attacks. The United Nations called for an immediate ceasefire. Aid agencies struggled to get access to the affected areas, but their efforts were hampered by the ongoing violence and the Israeli blockade. Inside Gaza, people were trapped. With the borders sealed, there was nowhere to escape the bombs. The people of Gaza are no strangers to suffering. For decades, they have endured occupation, blockade, and repeated military incursions. They have shown remarkable resilience in the face of adversity. But how much more can they endure? How much more can they be expected to bear? The latest round of violence shattered a fragile ceasefire that had been in place since January 19th. Brokered by Egypt, Qatar, and the United States, the agreement was meant to pave the way for a more lasting peace. It called for the phased release of Israeli hostages held by Hamas in Gaza, and Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli jails. It also raised the possibility of an Israeli withdrawal from Gaza and the reconstruction of the Strip. But the ceasefire was deeply flawed from the start. Hamas accused Israel of reneging on its commitments, of failing to ease the blockade, and of continuing to carry out arrests in the West Bank. Israel, for its part, accused Hamas of using the ceasefire to rearm and regroup. Each side blamed the other for the breakdown of talks. The truth, as always, was more complex. The ceasefire was a casualty of mistrust, of missed opportunities, and of the hardliners on both sides who were never truly invested in peace. The collapse of the ceasefire has had profound implications for both Israelis and Palestinians. For Israelis, it has brought a renewed sense of insecurity, a fear that the conflict will never end. For Palestinians, it has brought more suffering, more death, and more destruction, and for the wider region, it has raised the specter of a wider conflagration. Within Israel, the bombing of Gaza has been met with a mixture of support and condemnation. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, facing mounting pressure from right-wing members of his coalition government, defended the attacks as necessary to protect Israeli citizens from Hamas rockets. But his decision to launch such a large-scale operation, just weeks after agreeing to a ceasefire, has drawn criticism from opposition politicians and peace activists. The families of the Israeli hostages held in Gaza were particularly vocal in their condemnation. They accused Netanyahu of abandoning their loved ones, and of putting political expediency ahead of their lives. Their anger and despair were palpable. For them, the ceasefire represented the best hope of seeing their loved ones again. Now that hope has been extinguished. The bombing of Gaza has also reignited the debate within Israel about the country's policy towards the Palestinians. Some argue that the only way to achieve security is through strength, through the relentless pursuit of Hamas. Others argue that the only way to achieve lasting peace is through dialogue, through a negotiated settlement that addresses the legitimate aspirations of both Israelis and Palestinians. The path ahead is uncertain, but one thing is clear: the status quo is unsustainable. Sooner or later, something has to give. All this information is from BBC News. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you very much.